All right, here we go, Celeste. Celeste is throwing cookies to her dogs. Oh, how timely, because today's live is about food. So if any of you have not been on our lives before, I'm Laura Hunter, owner of Drop Leash Dog Training. This is Celeste Gagnon, who teaches classes with me in the program. And we're here today to talk about using food when training your dogs. So Celeste, I have a silly story for you before we get into this. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I had a dog, Lassie, how original. And Lassie was invisible. My parents really liked Lassie because it really took the pressure off. But one day, Lassie we couldn't get on the Queen Street streetcar to go to my grandparents. We missed 2 actually, because Lassie had to poop and I wasn't getting on the streetcar till Lassie pooped. So I'm pretty sure the next day Lassie went to the SPCA. It's been there ever since. So why am I telling you this stupid story? Because I was thinking this morning about Lassie and the TV show, and about the fact that we hear from our clients a lot of conflicting opinions about whether we should be using food to train. And I'm blaming all of the controversy on Timmy and his family, because that dog went out of its way every single week to save that family, and they never even threw it a cookie. So, I have a feeling that even you and I, Celeste, inside all of us, we all have this fantasy about owning a Lassie, the dog that does everything for us, everything we want it to do, and it just does it because it loves us, or it's, thinks that, worships at our feet, or thinks that we're like the greatest thing on the planet. And so I'm blaming all of the things that we hear on Lassie. Well, not Lassie, but Timmy and his family. So let's go back to something a little more serious. So that is the number one question that we hear every day, probably in this program, is why do I have to use food to train my dog? And the subset question of that is, of course, shouldn't they just do it because we want them to? A lot of people think that somehow it's just wrong that we should have to reward our dogs for performing specific behaviors for us. But, if you look at it from the dog's perspective, using food as a reinforcer makes complete sense to them, because before we domesticated them for thousands and thousands of years, their whole life revolved around looking for food, searching for it, hunting for it, foraging for it, because they were scavenging creatures as well. It was a real full-time job that kept them alive. So, I still think our dogs are happy, and I think that mindset is encoded in them, and they are still happy to work for food. They don't see it as an issue. We both know from our own experiences, our dogs, I don't know if your dogs eat out of bowls or not, actually, Celeste. I know mine never do. I think yours, do they?
It's half and half.
Yeah. But I know that if I dropped a bowl on the floor full of food, it would be a non-event. It would be over in 3 seconds, whereas my dogs are crazy to go out in the backyard and just forage all day. That's all Rosie would like to do when she goes out in the backyard. And, we use a lot of food in our training games, and we're always throwing food for them to chase, and they love to chase the food, and they seem really happy to work for it all day long. And we know that it is a really satisfying and enrichment activity for them. So that's not a scientific, opinion in any way, but it's certainly anecdotal in both our lives that our dogs are just really happy to do something for food all day long. So why wouldn't we indulge them in that? And I guess the other point is that if you were to make a list on one side of all of the behaviors that your dogs want to do, which is chasing, barking, scavenging, chewing, sniffing, digging, biting, those are all behaviors that are intrinsically motivating to them. And in fact, those behaviors are instinctive for them. We call them modal action patterns, which just means that they're common to all animals in that breed, and that they are not learned behaviors or instinctive behaviors that the dogs are just driven to do. So that's their list. If you look at our list, there's nothing on our list that's on their list. So what do we want dogs to do? Believe it or not, a lot of people just want their dogs to stop moving so much. They want a calm dog who will hang out beside them, not run around exploring, walk beside me at a snail's pace, don't bark, even though that's how they communicate. And I have to admit, we are guilty of that in our house. We are always trying to tone down the barking. Don't chase the squirrel, hang out beside me instead. I don't want to have to run and chase you. And, so being our loyal companion is a really tough job. And I think we need to pay them to do it. That's all there is to it. So, the question is, why are we so averse to offering our dogs compensation for a job when we insist on that for ourselves? I love my job and I love teaching my classes and I like all the people and I love the dogs, but I'm not going down to the field to train people's dogs if I can't, if I don't get something of value for it. For me, I certainly want to be paid for my work, and most people do. A lot of people go to jobs that are not intrinsically motivating. They need to get paid, but most of us, even if we like our work, we need to be provided with something of value for our efforts. So why do our dogs need to be so altruistic about making us happy? I don't really have an answer for that at this point. Like there are a lot of people who also, this is one that we commonly hear, is the dogs only want to do it for the food. They're obsessed with the food. They only care about the food. They won't do it unless there's food. Every day we see and we hear, in our classes from owners who are really upset about the fact that their dogs are super motivated by food. A lot of people consider dogs' desire for food at best an inconvenience. And honestly, I have to say, sometimes at worst, they consider it a character flaw. I've heard from people who have been very proud about the fact that their dogs weren't food motivated. I'm thinking, wow, there's something wrong, but not my problem. So there is, I don't know, is it an underlying lassie thing that, we all want the lassie who's just going to do it because we are great? Is that a human ego thing that dogs should be more interested in us than food? I don't know. Who knows? You have any thoughts on that?
Well, it makes me laugh when people complain about that, because it's going to make their life so much easier. The food motivation part.
No kidding. And actually, I kind of get where they're coming from, that it can be an inconvenience, because you're talking to a woman today whose kitchen is locked and all her clothes are locked in her closets because we want to have the few remaining pockets that we still have in the clothes that we have left. So I get it at times, but you're absolutely right in that if you have a food-driven dog, you have an incredibly powerful training tool in food. So I'm willing to actually, live with gates and in my house, and certainly we don't want to let a dog in our house near the kitchen counter, and we do have to put our clothes away, but it's probably a good thing that we have to put our clothes away. So, it's not the end of the world. I'm willing to sacrifice that minor inconvenience for having a super powerful training tool I can use with my dog. And we all know that there are other training tools that we can use out there in the world. There's some dogs that work for toys. You have a dog that works for toys, Penny, and I almost think Penny works. She's more excited in agility for toys.
Yeah.
And so is my Maddie, and so is Annie. So that's a good thing. And, people can use, I guess what you call life rewards as well, access to walks and access to, the backyard and whatever. But those, not every dog in the world is toy driven, and I don't think there are many pet owners out there who have the skills or who want to take the time to turn their dog into a toy driven dog, because it is a bit tricky.
Well,
And
and not every scenario, sorry, not every scenario lends itself to using a toy either.
that's exactly right,
Yeah.
is that toys can be awkward, because we have used toys in agility and they work really well as long as your dog brings the ball back. you know,
Yeah.
and
And,
we
and as long as the other dogs around are okay with it.
exactly, exactly. And they're just not as convenient. They're more time consuming. So food is cheap, it's convenient. You can use it in really, really specific ways. You can really control how you use your food, and it's just faster. You don't have to go retrieve the food. You don't have to get the dog to bring the food back. So it is just such an easy thing to do. I think what we need to do is we need to possibly, I don't know how to say this, we need to reframe the way in which we use food. Um, if I could find the guy who decided that we were going to put all that food in bags and call it treats or rewards and sell it for a lot of money in a pet store, I would hunt him down, because people tend to think of all of that as a treat or reward for your dog. And it's something, when you talk about it that way, oh, here's a reward, is, to me, it seems like they're offering the dog a reward for a performance, or the dog has the opportunity to win a treat or earn a reward for a performance of a behavior. But to our dog, there's nothing, it's not a special reward that they're working for. It's just food. It might taste better. Some of it they might not even like, but it is just food. And they, in their heads, they're still working just to acquire it. We're the ones that have that different perspective on it. So from a science perspective, food is usually referred to as a positive reinforcer. And to qualify it, it obviously is always, sorry, I'm just losing all my notes here off the table. It is always, it has to be a reinforcer a positive reinforcer from the dog's perspective as well. So it has to be something the dog wants. But if it is something that the dog wants, it is considered to be a positive reinforcer. And we use positive reinforcers throughout the teaching process to build value for the behaviors we want. If, according to science, we use positive reinforcement for a dog performing a behavior, that dog is going to either continue to repeat that behavior or increase the intensity or the frequency with which they perform the behavior. So behavior goes up. If we use positive reinforcement, behavior goes up. But I think, again, a lot of people just see the food as a reward for that performance. We ask the dog to do something, and often it's something that is probably undertrained. And half the time the dog doesn't understand what we're asking, or there hasn't been any value built in for doing that behavior. And so the dog doesn't come through with the behavior. And the owner says, hey, sorry, I can't give you anything because you didn't do what I wanted. And then you're both in a tricky spot. So, maybe I've seen this. People can ask for the behavior again, and they can ask for it, over and over. And maybe eventually the dog will start to figure it out. Maybe you'll get that behavior after a lot of trial and error, but trial and error isn't reinforcing to your dog. And is the behavior going to stick, or is it going to improve? Or most importantly, there's a lot of frustration along the way while you're doing that. And we all get caught in that. I got caught in that a couple of weeks ago with Annie, and I'll maybe talk about that later if we have time. But it's not a successful scenario when your dog keeps failing and failing and failing and then just happens to get it right once. That's not building reinforcement history. And the big thing is that in the scenario, the dog, it's actually putting the responsibility on the dog for failing. And it's really not the dog's fault. Everybody, we all talk about that all the time, especially in agility. If the dog can only work with the information you're giving them, basically. So, I mentioned the term reinforcement history. And so reinforcement history, what I'm talking about is you and the dog practicing together, you making the progression simple enough that the dog can continue to be reinforced for, giving you successive steps or trying to give you the successive steps. And that builds in the motivation and the understanding for the dog. So it's something that has to happen, reinforcement over time, and you have to set up the situation so the dog can get reinforcement to stay in the game. If my dog was making continuous errors when I was asking them for behaviors, or if they weren't offering what I was looking for, I would need to stop and think, where did I not, oh my God, why isn't my dog doing this? But where did I fail to reinforce this? Because I'm not getting it now. Somewhere down back, previously, I didn't provide enough reinforcement for my dog to either understand it or to want to do it. So it's my issue, not the dog's, So, yeah. So I know that's when I was first thinking about that, I thought that's kind of a bit of a difficult concept for people, maybe understanding the difference between rewarding the dog for behavior and reinforcing. And this could be like my own thought process, but I know another trainer that sort of talks about this as well. Let me give you an example. Let's give everybody a couple of examples. Recall is an interesting one, because recall it's an expensive behavior for dogs, because we're usually calling them away from something that they're really invested in and asking them to come back to us, and we're not that exciting. So, I see this, and we used to see this in the games program, but we see it in all our classes. If somebody calls the dog and the dog doesn't come back right away, or, the dog doesn't come back at all, there's always a tendency, and believe me, I've, been annoyed. This morning I was calling, okay, so here's another, I'm digressing here, but it happened this morning. Rosie's down in the field, and you know what Rosie's doing down in the agility field. She's cleaning up all the treats from last night's agility class. And so I'm calling, and I wanted to get going, and Annie's waiting, and eventually she comes up the hill, and it's really easy to get annoyed, especially with a dog who absolutely knows recall and who has a really good recall, to have to stand there and call. But the first thing I had to think about was, okay, well, she's down the field. There's like a million cookies on the field right now. And even though I'm annoyed that I was standing here for 2 minutes calling her, I have to provide something of equal value. I have to, because obviously, the reinforcement down in the field is so high, I have to provide something of equal or better value. So yes, I had to throw a lot of rollover and play a good game with her and all that, and not say, oh my God, dog, why didn't you come back up? So that's what happens is, the dog comes back too slowly, and people say, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a cookie because that was a really crappy recall. So what's going to happen next? The dog didn't get paid, did not get reinforced, even though it was slower. And so, what you're doing is you're not reinforcing your current recall, you're reinforcing for the next one. And so Maybe what you have to do is go back and make the whole exercise simpler for the dog so that you can build in that reinforcement history and let them experience success. And you do that with food rewards, you know. Agility is another one. Agility is a big one because you and I both know that we have a number of clients who do not think that they should use food on course for a number of reasons. The dog should just love to run agility for the sake of loving agility. Food distracts them from what they're supposed to be doing. That's the big one I hear, is that food distracts them from what they're supposed to be doing. And so, you know, agility is not in the beginning intrinsically motivating for your dog. It's hard. It's actually, I think, harder for the dog than the handler, because the dog has not only a lot of skills to learn, they're following really confused people in the beginning, and confusion is really tough. And, you know, we all screw up in our handling, and it does, you know, it does demoralize a lot of dogs. My dogs prefer just to sit there and bark in an angry way at me, which is fine. But you know, a lot of dogs just get demoralized by the whole thing. So we can use food to make up for our inabilities. We can position feed to teach the dogs to drive ahead or away from us. We can use food to bring them back when they check out, and they do check out when handlers make mistakes because it is stressful. Mm-hmm. So we need to keep reinforcing them for attempting to hang out with us through all of that. And you know, like, I guess everybody would be much more successful, I think, if they used more food in agility. But I know that, and I know also, and I'm not trying to lose students here. And, you know, it's a natural thing to think that if your dog has, you know, if your dog's missed something, that, you know, were they not trying hard enough? You know, they weren't listening. Maybe they weren't paying attention. I heard that a couple of times on the field this week, and this is common in all dog training. Oh, they weren't bothering to pay attention. They only want to do it when they want to do it. They want to do it when they feel like doing it. I don't think our dogs think like that. I think they're just having a tough time, and so, you know, we just need to make it easier for them and build that reinforcement history in. You know, like sometimes I go out in the field and I demo with the dogs, and the dog does, you know, whatever I'm asking them to do, and people say, well, you're a teacher, you've been handling the dog should, but what people are missing is the fact that I'm throwing like 500 cookies for the dog out on the field because I can't run. So, you know, I've got to do something to reinforce the dog for giving me that effort and for showing them where to go. So, you know, when they go over the jump, I'm reinforcing them for, yeah, that was a great decision. You took the jump. That was exactly right, even though I might not have, you know, communicated that perfectly. And here is where you are to go next. And you throw the cookie ahead, and the dog gets reinforced for that behavior of continually moving ahead in an easy way. So it's going to become understandable to the dog that, yes, I take the jump. Wow, I got reinforced for that, and I keep moving forward. So, you know, you and I are both very biased in terms of food, and we just throw tons and tons of food for our dogs because we know that we're building that reinforcement history for the final behaviors that we want. Yeah. It's not just a case of rewarding the final behavior or not rewarding the final behavior. It's building the reinforcement history. And then if you don't get the final behavior, you go back and you figure out where the value is missing. Is it in the motivation, or is it in the understanding? And then you make it easier for the dog so they can build up tree of reinforcement. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, going back to your recall example, how you were saying if the dog doesn't come back, it's easy to not want to reward them. The other thing I see with people learning recall is they're cheap with the rewards, or they're cheap with the payment. So the dog will come back and they're feeling good that the dog's doing what they want and the dog's good, he's got his treat. But if there was actually a real distraction, you'd be lost.
Absolutely. Yes. And you and I hear, we know, and we hear that a lot. And I know that a lot of people struggle with recall. And there are a couple of tricks that we teach in our games program for recall, but really we know that it is just a matter of building value through training, building that reinforcement for the dog coming back. So our dogs know when they come back to us. You're right. People tend to give one cookie, which is really stingy because recall's really expensive behavior, and the dog, you end up with a grab and go dog. Whereas our dogs come back, my dogs come back, and they get tons of food reinforcers, but they also get those reinforcers in the form of a game where they can chase, which they love more than anything in life. And then if possible, we send them back to do whatever they just left. So for our dogs, recalls are no brainers around here because my dogs don't think they are losing anything. They are trusting me because we've worked through that reinforcement history together. They're trusting me to offer that to them every time. And so, and the same with you and Penny and Gimli, you know, and that's another comment that we hear quite often is, well, my dogs only do it because they know we have food. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, they do. You only go to work because you know you're getting a paycheck on Friday. But it's a little more complex than that, I guess, because I think, and this is just an opinion, I think that's more of a training mistake or a mechanical error. Because I know I've seen a lot of people who have the food in their hand when they're asking the dog for a behavior. So I don't think our dogs look at us if we have food in our hand and say, oh, well, since you have food, I might do what you want me to. I think the visibility of the food is all part of the cue to do the behavior. So because dogs are very specific, they're very contextual. You know that sit in the kitchen means something different than sit, you know, in the living room. So they would look for those details and they look for those environmental cues. So very, very well, you know, if you're standing there with a cookie and you're asking your dog to sit or to come, the dog could very well be thinking, okay, well, in this specific context where Laura's standing in front of me and she has, and cookies are important, dogs notice this, she has a cookie in her hand, I should sit. And then when the cookie's missing, it changes the situation, changes the environment. I don't know. It's just a half-baked theory I have. But I know that you and I know even my husband, we carry food pretty much 24, well, not 24 because we're sleeping, but throughout our waking hours, we have food with us. You have food right now. You're feeding your guys because they're being quiet, you know, while you're doing the video.
Yeah.
I have never left the house without food. My food is in a treat pouch, but my dogs know it's there. But they also know, because of the way we work, that just because it's there doesn't mean they have to be bugging me for it all the time. They trust that if they do as I ask them to do, that there will be a reinforcement. There will be reinforcement coming, whether I have food in my hand or whether I don't. Actually, if I have food in my hand, Rosie Rosie's brain like just leaks out her ears and her eyes cross, and she can't even listen to what I'm saying. So if I have food in my hand, I don't get anything from Rosie. So it doesn't matter to them whether we have food in our hands or not, because of all the training and the reinforcement history. They trust us to do the right thing by them if they give us what we need, I think. Yeah, I don't see food in the hand as an issue, but other than it's a contextual cue.
And I think that, I mean, if I'm ever in a situation where I've run out of treats or I've for some reason forgotten, but I can't remember the last time that happened, but let's say we're doing agility and I'm running low on treats. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna hand out treats continuously like I would normally do.
Yeah.
Because we've kind of built that
resilience.
We can stagger it a little bit more. We can,
yes,
and it'll work. I mean, I wouldn't then do it all the time because I don't want to lose that.
No.
But in a sticky situation, if they're used to getting rewarded all the time for whatever behavior it is, if you're stuck and you need them to do something like an emergency recall and you have nothing on you, you can play with them, take them home, and then give them like a ice cream sundae.
Apology. But you have a really good point, which plays really well into the next point that I wanted to make. Thank you, Celeste. Because, and this was a funny one, because the dogs do trust us to do the right thing and keep them in the game, with us. And that becomes even more important when we're looking at choice-based behaviors.
Yes.
So I started writing down on my notes, I started writing down all the choice-based behaviors that we want from our dogs. And every behavior I've ever wanted from my dog is a choice-based behavior. Recall is choice. Staying with us is choice. Off leash. Loose leash walking is the dog's choice. Leave it. Stay. Drop it. Every one of those behaviors is ultimately the dog's choice, unless you are willing to exert physical control all the time. And I don't even know how you do that for a stay command unless you're like sitting on them. But the sad thing is, I know a lot of dogs, they go through life never getting off a 6-foot leash. And it's because they haven't been taught and reinforced to stay with us and to come back to us. And for a lot of people, their dogs are always pulling and always appearing to want to be somewhere else because the world is incredibly exciting and we're not. But the good news is that you can actually have a dog, because we do have dogs that always want to stay with you and always want to come back to you and think you're the greatest thing in the world. There's the good news that you can buy your dog's love. You can absolutely buy your dog's love. It's called classical conditioning. And it's something we rely heavily on in our program and the way we train our dogs. Sandy, who runs agility on Sunday night, she had a great way of describing it. And she says, cookies replace leashes. And I thought, I'm getting a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Cookies.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah, no kidding. So for people who are not totally familiar with classical conditioning, dogs learn in two ways. We sort of lure them or, capture behavior like a sit. The dog sits and we give them a cookie for sitting and hope that, if we repeat this enough, the dog will, that behavior will stay and it will increase and grow throughout the dog's life. There is, that's what we call operant conditioning. There is also another way dogs learn. They learn by association, and one event predicts the other. And that is classical conditioning. It's a predictive association between events. And it is a super, super powerful way of teaching your dog. So if staying close to us or turning back to us or walking beside us predicts lots and lots of really good reinforcement, that is just naturally where the dogs are that's where they're going to want to be. So if they make the choice, if we set up the environment in a way that the dog, it makes it easy for the dog to turn back to us or come back to us or stay with us, and we offer them reinforcement for that good choice, that's the choice they're going to want to make. And to me, it's an easy way to teach a dog. And in the games program, we, as well as I do, we offer them the food reinforcers, but we always offer it through games, and that doubles the value for the dogs. So I bet that you and I cannot remember the last time we just handed a dog a piece of food. So people are always shocked at how much food we use in training, but our dogs are working for every single piece of that food. Even if we're just playing with them, they're chasing it. We throw it, we drop it, we bowl it, and we're tapping into that incredibly motivating activity that the dogs really love, which is chasing and acquiring food. It's what they are genetically encoded to do. And I think in that case, we're using the food as a bridge to those games, and that's an incredibly powerful tool.
I think when you're using food in that way, you're asking your dog to do things. We don't speak the same language, so they don't really understand what we want from them or why. But when we give them the chase and food acquisition, we are speaking their language at that point.
Yes, absolutely. And we know that, if our dogs, if I'm out in the back field and my dogs see, turkeys or squirrels or something, they're going to stop, they're going to look, I'm going to let them look because that's really motivating. That's a great thing. But they also know to turn back to me. And I'm hoping, they've understood that they're not getting that squirrel up in the tree and they're not getting the turkeys on the other side of the fence, but I will give them chase and acquire food, which is the predatory sequence, which is like, for my dogs, that's the ultimate is to finish that predatory sequence. So it's very, very powerful learning. And we use tons of food reinforcers in it. But the thing about classical conditioning is the more heavily we reinforce our dogs in the beginning, the stronger the association. And I certainly choose to use lots of food with my dogs because it makes them happy, but I don't have to use certainly the amount of food I used to. My guys, because it builds a habit. Classical conditioning builds habits in your dogs, and the value transfers over to us. So, people are always saying, well, if I use food, or that's not about me. We have the exact opposite experience. We use food and it becomes all about us because we're the ones that are playing the food games based and all games the food of them. So, oh my God, look, we're like gods to our dogs, I'm sure. Ha ha.
Some produce food. Yeah, that's pretty. That's what we want. So I'm wondering, because we always use the word reward, and reinforcer is a perfect word. But instead of reward the dog, we should probably think of it now as more about like a pay your dog for what they did. It's a payment.
Yes.
Instead of a reward.
Well, if you think of it in human terms, yes, you can absolutely go down that road, because certainly all of us who get paid for work, we feel that we are doing, we're doing a good job and we're putting value into it, so we deserve value back from it. Yeah. The only time I worry is when people say to the dog, "Well, I can't pay you because you didn't do it," Right. And I just want people to understand that if the dog's not doing it, we didn't reinforce it enough somewhere down the road. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is, of course, our final question to address today. When can I stop using food with my dog? And my answer always is, why do you want to, actually? Which is a really flippant answer. And I shouldn't actually give people that answer. But science, thank goodness, science says that behaviors that aren't reinforced will eventually extinguish. And you know, let's say that you have a new job. You just got hired on by a new company, and you have a 3-month training period. So you get paid, which is really cool, for the 3 months worth of training. And people say, "Wow, you're doing a great job." You get lots of reinforcement for that, and you get paid. And then at the end of 3 months, your boss comes to you and they said, "Well, you were fantastic. You did an amazing job. We really want to hire you. You did great. You know your stuff. And because you're so good at knowing your stuff, we'd like to offer you a job, but we don't think we have to pay you because you're really good at what you do." And that is like probably the most ridiculous scenario on the planet, but it's exactly what we're saying to our dogs. Well, not us, but it's exactly what people would like to say to their dogs. "Well, I finished training you and you know your stuff. So, maybe I'm only going to pay you, for 1 out of every 5 recalls. Or maybe, you have to walk, you have to go and you have to do a downstay for 25 minutes before I give you, some sort of reinforcement for that, or maybe I'm just not going to give you any reinforcement anymore because you know what you're doing." Same scenario. It's just as ridiculous. And the thing is, that the biggest issue in that, aside from the fact I wouldn't do it to my dogs, is that we dog owners are always going to be in competition with the environment, because the environment has a million reinforcers or rewards or whatever you want to call it for our dogs. And they are always there and always present. So, your dog walks out of the house, your dog walks into Disneyland. Especially, these days, people work full time and dogs don't get out a lot. So it is really Disneyland when you do get out there, because you just spent, 8 hours in the house doing nothing. So there's squirrels, there's smells, there's other dogs, there's people, there's everything. There's just this massive, huge Disneyland of sensory experiences and animals to chase, and that whole predatory thing. And like, your dog doesn't even have to do a sit or a down. It just has to go out there and chase something or smell something. So we're already behind the 8 ball the minute we walk out the door. So I know that there is that theory that you have to pay less frequently, or you make them work harder for it, or you don't pay it at all anymore. But if I'm going to ask my dogs to stay with me off leash, which they do, and not chase the turkeys or the squirrels and come back when I call them, I'm going to pay that every time. I just am, because if I don't, something else will, So I think people forget how exciting the world is, and not to. We can't compete, or we have to compete. We're always in competition, actually.
But that said, there is a way to reduce the rate of reinforcement, but you would never eliminate it.
No, I would never eliminate it. I know now, if I call my guys back, like this morning we were out and Annie's decided there's a million squirrels out there right now. It's just squirrel overload. It's squirrel city out there. And Annie got a little wound up about it this morning, but I still marked them for looking at the squirrel. They still came back to me. And, a couple of years ago, I would have played a lot of orientation game and thrown them massive amounts of high value food when they were first learning about this and we were first working through it. But again, because they were so reinforced in the beginning, that we built that positive association. And honestly, this morning, I just threw them a couple of pieces of kibble to chase, and then we just walked on. But I still wanted to offer them something. I just have to offer them as much as I used to, or as high a value. Yeah, but and I could probably get away with possibly not offering every time, but I just don't choose to.
Yeah.
I'm basically just a foodie.
Like I'm the same. I always give her something, but it might just be a couple kibbles, And then
Yeah.
another time I might just give her a jackpot of stuff without her doing anything different. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, and it just kind of keeps them interested. They never know. They never know when it's going to be a jackpot of treats or if it's just going to be a 1 or 2 thing.
Yes, and you and I just like to give our dogs extra stuff at times. So I'm sure that when both of us go out of the house, we have at least 2 different values of reinforcement in our pockets. Like today I had kibble, but I also had rollover, so, and I'll match the effort. So, if the turkeys had shown up 3 feet in front of us on the path, I wouldn't be throwing kibble, I'd be throwing rollover, because dogs are good at economy. And it's not even that. It's if they're going to make that extra effort, like a squirrel up in the tree, Annie's barking at it, but Annie's not stupid. She knows she isn't getting the squirrel, so she's coming back to it anyway. But, if it's turkeys 3 feet in front of me on the path and they turn back, that is a massive effort on the part of my dogs, and I want to show them that I appreciate that extra effort. Yeah. So, we are foodies and we are biased, but I will say that, and most of my students are as well. I think we've got a good group of people who understand that their dogs need that reinforcement history, and the 2 big points I want to leave everybody with certainly is that the value does transfer to you. So both you and I could get away, with engaging our dogs in a game with us, because the value has transferred to us, and it's easier for us, and we don't have to reinforce as much as we used to, because turning back to us has become a habit in our dogs. And that's what classical conditioning does. It builds a habit, because it's just, Rosie thinks it's just such a, if I look at Rosie, Rosie's walking beside me. I've told her to go sniff, but it's her choice if she wants to go sniff. But Rosie would walk beside me for miles in the thoughts of getting, possibly, something to reinforcement for that. And that's a lot of resilience. And I throw her food, I don't mind. Or take something, another example is in the house, coming in the house, or coming in the house. So I massively reinforce my dogs for coming in the house when they were puppies. We'd run into the house and we'd play games and we'd throw food, and they built this huge positive association for coming in the house. Well, I'm pretty sure that if they're out in the yard and they yell in the house, like they're killing themselves to get through the door. And I haven't given them a piece of food in 5 years for coming in the house, but that habit's there and it's stuck. And we did it so much in the beginning. And that's what does make life easy with your dogs down the road. You don't have to reinforce every single behavior for the rest of your dog's life, but the big ones you do. I believe the big ones you do for sure. So, anyway, so hopefully people think about what we said today. If you have any questions at all, for any of you who've listened today, thank you for listening. If you have any questions at all about any of what we've said, or you'd like to get into a discussion with us about anything we've said, we would be more than happy to do that. So, just post any comments, please, in the comments section. Any questions you have, we will of course answer them, and would love to get into conversations with people about any of this. So let us know. And thanks to everybody for coming out to listen, whoever did on this terrible, awful day.
Oh,
and thank you. Sorry?
There's a few people.
Oh, good.
We have some comments already, so we'll get to them after the live.
Good. I can see them. So thanks for joining me, Celeste, and thank you, everybody. And we're going to be back next week with another live. I think next week planning on doing a live about reactivity again, maybe, because we have some stuff we want to share about reactivity. But if you guys want us to come back and engage in a conversation again about training and food, just let us know. We'd be happy to do that too. I'm pretty sure we could talk for another hour about food, but we got to go. Anyway, thanks everybody. Take care and have a good day.